Okay, guys, good afternoon for those in Europe. Whatever greeting you may need for those who are. Well, the space today is rather centered on the situation in Donbass mostly, but unfortunately, yesterday evening we finally managed to have the happening that everybody was doubting about. And I'm going to be extremely brief on that, maybe 5-10 minutes maximum. First of all, three main points. What was being said, had been said since 2014, including by myself, is that Israel cannot afford to fail any interception because of its strategic depth that is inexistent. And the saturation that apparently the Iranians have been operating with the Israeli and the allies of Israel, in this case, air defense systems and aircraft, stands at about, according to Iran again, roughly 350 flying objects, of which 110 were ballistic missiles, of which, according to who you listen, between 8 and 17 went through. This is the nightmare scenario for Israel because, first of all, it shows that the Iranians can start saturating your level of air defense accordingly. So they're gonna send their shitty Gerans, then they're gonna send cruise missiles, and then the ballistic missiles. Everything's gonna be more or less set up to arrive in a threshold of time between 15 and 45 minutes in order to not allow the Israeli air defense to recover, and also to keep as much as possible the Israeli or the Allied aircrafts up in the air. So the saturation strategy, as I said, this evening or early in the morning, works. It will always work. If you saturate anything enough, it will break. And this is a quasi-physical, I'd say, logic. If you saturate anything, it will break or it will open or it will do exactly what you want to do. In the case of Israel, and this is the second point, what is extremely negative is that the first wave, when I'm saying the first wave, I should better say day. The first day of attack already resulted in at least 8. Let's go with a bullshit pro-Israeli number. At least 8 went through. And 8, I'm going to repeat myself, if these missiles are nuclear tipped, it means that if these missiles strike in a very small territory, about 25 kilometers on the coast of Israel, you're going to wipe out a rather large number of Israeli citizens, but also a fuck ton of critical industries, critical institutions, etc., etc., etc. So the biggest threat for Israel was penetration. It wasn't how much, it wasn't how many, it wasn't how deep, it was just penetration. In a sense, Israel just went through two very, in my opinion, traumatic events. 7th of October, no need to describe it. Its military apparatus, its intelligence apparatus completely failed. Fuck ups happened. They killed their own people. Hamas did the damage that it was supposed to do. pulled the Israelis into this ground operation that is lasting now for over 6 months, and we have no end in sight of the said operation because, as you may have seen, the Israelis are not able to match their reputation with the deeds, despite the fact that they have unimpeded air dominance, that have weapon supplies, they have intelligence, and they have coverage, because that's what happened yesterday. The Israelis had a 200 to 400 kilometer stretch defended by both anti-aircraft systems from Jordan, British and American planes. And these planes could loiter as much as they wanted because you had the tankers over Iraq that were waiting for the planes to refuel and go back to the air defense mission. And despite this, you had arrivals over the sky of Israel. We saw that at least 3 points were aimed. The one air base in the Negev, ballistic missiles over Jerusalem, and also over north of Israel. Now the impacts, as I said, need to be checked. We don't know how much. What is the BDA? What are the damages? But the point is, with the ballistic missiles, you don't need extreme accuracy. I'm not saying they're not accurate. I'm saying you don't need it because at any given moment, those could be nuclear tipped. So it would be a salam alaikum moment for Israel. The problem, and that's the third point, is that the expense itself on both sides, I think, was massive. For the Iranians, now we hear numbers of roughly somewhere from 40 to 65 million dollars. I'd say a bit more. Frankly, we're looking at 110 million dollars with everything that's needed for the cost of the missiles, the conservation, the intelligence, control, and so on. But once again, if the roughly 400, 350 flying objects that were sent were intercepted by an array of missiles and systems, and we are even close to 500, 600 million dollars, of course, people are going to say it was worth it. And I would say yes, for sure. Right now, it was worth it because it averted major damage over Israel. But it didn't stop the barrage. Despite all the layers, so the flying wings over Iraq, the Jordanian air defense, Israeli air force, Israeli air defense. We are into a logic here. What I said I said yesterday, the density of air defenses and aircraft provided defenses was probably highest at that moment. We were with probably a squadron over both Jordan and Iraq, another squadron over Israel, plus the batteries and so on. So we are looking, honestly, if we are not breaking the $1 billion on interceptors and other kind of missiles, I'll be surprised. But even half of that is still a major expenditure for Israel. Now, let's go back to the real point. The real point is that for Iran, this was a proof of concept. Proof of concept is that the ballistic missiles could strike with enough density of attack in attacking flying objects. So let's say you're gonna double down on what you just did. So basically 20 plus ballistic missiles and another 300, so 600 total flying objects of other kinds of cruise missiles, Shahids, whatever. And instead of having 17 or 8, whatever, ballistic missiles, due to the fact that you're gonna saturate the whole layer. These guys need to resupply. You're gonna be looking at maybe 60 ballistic missiles that go through because it's exponential. That's the whole point. Once you're empty, you don't need to fucking reload everything manually, and it's not 5 minutes. So for Iran, the proof of concept was passed. And as I said as well, the biggest issue is that if there was a counter-strike on the launchers, then it would have been indeed a nothing burger and even a disastrous move from Iran. Problem is that most of the launchers are road mobile, so you don't even see where they're going to launch them from. And even if you see where they're going to launch them from, they're just going to move to another position. Now, the hideouts, that's something else. But I think that the Iranians are mostly going to put them into civilian storages and then move them around. And then at some point, are going to be sure that those civilian storages are still moved until they arrive to their resupply base. This once again underscores the problem of strategic depth. Iran has it, although a lot of population is indeed concentrated in better pastures within the Iranian territory, because you also do know that unfortunately Iran has large plateau areas which are extremely arid and not always good for human life. There's still more than enough space to hide these launchers. Of course, you're gonna know where this stuff is produced. A lot of people said that tomorrow or yesterday, so today you're gonna have visits on Shahid factories and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, blah blah blah, for sure, just fucking do it. One of the things that the Israeli jets that would need to strike whatever objectives in Iran would have to overfly Iraq. And the only way to protect those jets during refuel is other jets to be there to protect them. Who's going to protect the tankers? Well, most probably American jets. So if America is ready to start a war on long term, knowing that it has troops on the doorstep of Iran, it wouldn't matter what they're trying to fucking do. They're still going to lose those troops in a way or another. I do not see the Americans do that. And the Americans are literally, Biden, I think, said that military objectives were struck during the night, which honestly is laying a fucking egg on the Israelis' face. But once again, as I said yesterday, the problem with Israel is that it put itself in a very bad position. First of all, by starting the operation, and second of all, by starting to break every single unwritten rule in this kind of conflict. This, of course, it was logical given how Israel felt like a mortal danger, although the Hamas attack, the 7th of October, was there to bait them in and provoke something that many Israelis hadn't felt for a long time, which is a visceral appeal to vanquish whatever was there for them. A lot of Israeli politicians literally called the Palestinians are subhuman or non-human animals, whatever you want to say. One of the things that these names, this categorization from Israelis has a lot in common with how the Ukrainians categorize the Russians. And in a sense, you would even give a pass to the Ukrainians, given that the Russians invaded the quote-unquote legal territory of Ukraine. But you just cannot have that with Israelis and Palestinians, because despite whatever happened from Hamas, as I said, Gaza had been a fucking zoo and had been treated as a fucking zoo. And even the South African apartheid regime, separation regime, wasn't this iniquitous back then. I know a lot of people are not going to agree, but guys, you don't have to agree with me. I'm just saying how that separation regime had nothing in common with how the Israelis have been separating themselves from the Palestinians on the living day by day. But when it came to exploiting them, and you can see that with how the Israeli construction sector has been completely depleted due to this war, because of course what is missing, Palestinian cheap labor. But when you go back to how Israel put itself to the current situation, where in 6 months, first of all, it had a extinction scare, let's call it as it is, where it had people that literally wanted to kill Jews, mostly adult ones. And then now you have that reminder that you are not safe, that Iranian ballistic missiles just went through. And these were not like ICBMs going hyper loop kind of speed. No, these were literally further developments of stuff that comes from the Cold War. I know that my Iranian listeners are not going to agree to that. I'm just oversimplifying to it, just to point out how bad for the concept of air defense, Israeli air defense, this is. Because they saturated they loaded the bases in order to stop everything, and still something got through. I know that Israel is going to say, yeah, but we knew. Fuck me. If you knew, then what made the difference if the fucking Iranians just put even a dirty bomb on these warheads? So once again, I'd say that right now the situation is 50-50. Iranians are happy something passed through. Probably they're not happy that a lot of air defense systems were used for. So basically the Jordanians that intervened, and the American forces in Jordan, American and British jets, and of course the American tankers. The most important part now is where do we go from here? Honestly, I feel that for the Iranians, the deed is done. The proof of concept is established in Israeli air defense without at least twice as much air defense capability and twice as much foreign aid is not going to hold it. So even if the Iranians go all out of it, because that's the problem with Israel right now, there is no physical connection between Israel and Iran. So everything's going to be a non-contact battle, missiles against planes and shit. If Iranians want to go pedal to the metal and, as I said, load 30, 40, 60, 100, 150 ballistic missiles with a kind of dirty bomb, or even actual nukes, we are indeed going to assist to a nuclear holocaust in the Middle East. Near East, actually, but Middle East generally. And then you open a Pandora box where the Americans would be forced to intervene. But this, once again, is just, as I said, if the Iranians want that. And right now, what the Iranians established, maybe not fully, but they established that you bleed, motherfucker, is the scene Predator one. Arnold finds that fluorescent blood. If it bleeds, it leads. You know the motto. So in this case, that's the problem with Israel right now. Israel is going to go ballistic in a sense. They are going to be retarded because, unfortunately, as I said, since the 7th of October, they saw death as a nation. Of course, they are over-exaggerating the risk and the danger, but that's the case with any paranoia regime. And the Israelis, unfortunately, are now, I'd say, even genetically paranoid, given what happened over 2,000 years ago. But this is the biggest problem for them, is that they cannot overstep again. Whatever they're going to do right now, they know that something is going to come their way, and the Americans are not going to fucking start spending interceptors and jets to keep Israel out of harm. And as I said, for the Iranians, it's just going to be a numbers game. And then instead of sending these 110 ballistic missiles, they're going to send 400, 500, 600. And a lot of people can say, yeah, but what about depletion? I said, yeah, no problem. If you saw the remnants of at least 3 or 4 ballistic missiles right now, they're extremely, compared to what the Russians are sending towards Ukraine, are really simplified. And you can see that it's a perishable object. Like, you just use it. You don't need to think too much. And I think this is one of the transfer of technologies that the Russians have been looking forward to see how it goes. That's why they went for the Shahids that now are the grants, but it's literally because it's a cost-effective mean. And the biggest problem I have with the Israeli leadership right now is that they are not recognizing, or at least they are not publicly recognizing where they fucked up, what this tells to their population. And the problem is also that the Israeli population right now, as I said, they are in bonehead mode, and they're not gonna fucking yield. They would rather see the fucking Middle East undergo a nuclear winter instead of admitting they're guilty. And this is a trait that many have in the Middle East. I'm not gonna like single them out, but the Israelis do to their mental status until now are for sure not gonna back down. So the point is now, to what extent is this going to escalate? If the Israelis get their lesson and go back to their shitty, underhanded tactics, which is killing a guy here and there, or bombing embassies, then we are going to have this roller coaster of actions from both sides. If the Israelis want to actually hit Iran directly, which, as I said, is going to be extremely complicated with their air force without American participation, well, something's going to happen to the American tankers. That's the biggest problem right now, and then it could go very, very badly, in the sense that, let's say that the Iranians come close enough, slot a U.S. KC-135, and you have these 10 guys dead, then a F-35 misses its rendezvous point to refuel and falls into Iraq or in Jordan. Like, the shit show is gonna fucking start being complete. Therefore, as I'm saying, the biggest problem that we have right now when it comes to the Israeli reaction is who is gonna talk them down. Biden right now is doing something that hasn't been working for 6 months, mostly because it's not credible. The Americans can talk as much as they want, but at the end, they're gonna yield because Holocaust, Mushoa. And I mean, you can think of me or whatever you want. It's a fact that the Israelis have been World War II shaming the Americans to death, and they're completely penetrated the politics. A lot of people can say they've penetrated most politics. I'm not into this whole conspiracy bullshit when it comes to the Jewish people, but for the Americans, that's clearly obvious if we go by the U.S. Senators and U.S. Leadership declarations and statements. There is no logic for what's going on. Why Ukraine needs to have a shitty German PAC-2 battery, which probably will not have all its missiles to defend itself. While for Israel, you have at least 2 squadrons, THAAD in Jordan, replenishment of weapons, while they are already the strongest party in the game against Hamas. We are into logic, I'm sorry guys, that clearly demonstrates that the when it comes to Israel, America is just a bitch. American political regime is the beach. They're just gonna say how much, how high, how deep. They're not gonna start pulling stops. And Biden has tried to make himself look like, but reality is that even the supposed peer to help people in Gaza was done completely within the parameters of the Israeli military doctrine with the fucking Gaza Strip. So, I mean, I don't need to tell these guys this. Now, the other problems, which are a lot more important, Nimrod, of course, edges. I do not know if they were used, but at least we can also add that as well. Now, the problem when it comes to what's next, as I said, is that what the Iranians do, because unfortunately, again, the Iranians shouldn't be the adults in the room, because, as I said, of course, they do not have a direct dog in this fight, except for the assassination of five members of the RGC, high ranked members, a deputy leader and shit. But the problem is that the Iranians now need to think twice, not as much for the dangers of their second replica. No, they need to think twice because it's true that opening a front, that kind of front with American intervention, is going to cause widespread malcontentment against the US and Israel in the area. That's for sure. It's already there. I mean, like, most Muslims literally, if it was possible, they would go into a jihad against Israel. But unfortunately, they are ruled by their own governments, whose governments would like to keep a statu quo. I'm not judging that, except for Jordan, who are literally dog shit. All the rest that is around them, be that Egypt, be that they have their own logic. And therefore, I'm not judging that. It's a political decision I could understand. With Jordan, I don't for many reasons, but that's another problem. However, as I said, if the Iranians were to go balls deep and indeed like pester the Israeli territory with any kind of weapon of mass destruction and start raking up the Israeli kills, then indeed we would be in a spiral where the US is not ready right now to intervene against Iran. There are going to be strikes and all that shit, no problem, decapitation strikes. But the most important part is that after that, they would need to start deploying troops in Saudi Arabia, which is a different ball game than having the Iraqi deployment logic. In Iraq, they cannot deploy troops to start attacking Iran. In Saudi Arabia, you have the problem that they would need to mostly go through the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, also not feasible. So, what is there now? What exactly is going to happen now? For both sides, I'm excluding Israelis right now. America cannot go back to Arab land with the same intentions that it did when it did Desert Storm. Politically, it's untenable. And it would require, given the size of Iran, shit like that, it would require at least 500,000 troops, which would require 1 million people to be mobilized for that shit. And then it would require you for sure to have a Iraqi deployment point. And with Russia being next door, that's not going to happen. So American intervention on the ground would be suicide. It would be literally, going out with a bang for sure, but it would be losing in Ukraine and losing in Iran. It would be honestly a strategic miscalculation of Trumpian proportion. And that's there's where I want to go. Maybe Trump is going to make that mistake by trying to kill the Ukrainian war and turn around to Iran and stoke the fires, because Trump has had this penchant for absolutely shitting the bed when it comes to Iran. So therefore, the biggest problem is how Iran is managing this. If Iran doesn't do anything stupid, it stays there, and the Israelis keep this fucking fear that they're going to get fucking BM'd to death by whatever warhead Iranians want to put there on their ballistic missiles. On the other side, we know now that a lot of parties can have Chinese satellite images. And the Chinese are literally playing warlord with that shit. So I would once again caution the Israelis against escalation. But once again, I do not believe the Israelis are logical players anymore, rational players anymore. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done what they did in Syria. Unless they want an escalation for which the US simply cannot go after them. The US cannot go after them because even, okay, you're going to start bombing Iran, then what? Iran are just going to rebuild. And they're proven that their ballistic missiles can be basically made up of things that military companies would literally treat as trash. It still would fly, it still would hit its target. But once again, this is what I'm saying. The Israelis need to fucking get a grip. They don't have it. They will never have it, because that's the whole interest that they have. They have to be seen as the mad dog, because that's how they also pull out intervention, pull out largesses from the US, and pull out this moral blackmail that have been doing with the West for now, as I said, over 40 years. Now, the second point was over Donbass. There we have rather interesting news. I posted a couple of things. So, as we said in the so-called Pokrovsk ledge, the Karlovka reservoir is happening to be the target. As I said, it's being turned into a kind of choke point. First of all, because the Ukrainians are going to defend it, are going to make out of the Karlovka reservoir a defensive line. They've already lost one heavy position, the damming over the reservoir. And as I said, that damming allowed the Ukrainians to cross from Netalove towards the northwest. That damming has been blown up. There's a flooding. Netalove is cut. They need to go down and further southwest if they want to cross. They've lost at least 3 tanks in the area so far. They've lost troops. They lost a couple of artillery assets. So the logic that I said, the point was to push them, to squeeze them towards that Karlovka reservoir and force them to cross over there, is being proven right. There is advance at Chasov Yar, and there is an advance both on Novobamutivka towards Attrition and Novobamutivka from Kalinove, north of Krasnogorivka and Avdiivka. There are losses, I've never hidden that, but the pace seems to have accelerated in advance, while the losses themselves are going to probably plateau at the end of April. What does it mean? It means that the Russians, once they have the lines they want on the Avdiivka corridor, they are going to go with the same logic they used against Avdiivka. They're just going to UMPK their way in and try probably a lot of faster, less armored assets, BMPs, Desert Crosses, MRAPs, cars, whatever. Maybe a little less a little less tanks, and they're going to start also gathering strength for Chasiv Yar, because as the Ukrainians are conceding it themselves, in Chasiv Yar the progress has been extremely dangerous for them, and whereas we're counting on the canal to defend the major part of Chasiv Yar from the Novi district, so Novi, the new Chasiv Yar part. Most probably, they're going to lose Novi district within 2 or 3 weeks, and then the Russians are going to get a little bit stuck on the canal, but they are already bypassing roads, and I think it's going to be mostly infantry work until the vehicles can cross. Now, the problem with Chasiv Yar, as I said, is that the city itself is not that big. It's extended, but it's not that big. It's a very different case than Avdiivka, because once you get evinced from any kind of location within the city, be that in Novi, be that beyond the canal, your backdrop is extremely deep. So you go from 240 meters to directly about 150, which makes your life extremely difficult. And Konstantinovka is over 130 meters under the level of Chasiv Yar. So once you get Chasiv Yar, Konstantinovka, which is not that close, but it's not that far, is literally ripe for artillery, ripe for FPVs, ripe for tank gun, ripe for everything. So you are going to lose that stuff within 3 to 4 months maximum. The problem for the Ukrainians right now is that they need to make choices, and the Russians finally got to that point with at least one part of the front when the Ukrainians need to make choices. Ivanivsk lasted a long time before it became what it is right now, which is it's free from Ukrainian troops, but the Russians do not have full control. Bogdanovka took also quite a long time, and for a lot of people it wasn't a good idea to attack Bogdanovka because it was on the low ground. The reality is that now we see why Bogdanovka is important, because you are attacking both Ivanivsk and Chasiv Yar approach. Therefore, Bogdanovka is the link between the two. So it allows the Russians to have more space to start and move on both sides. And then you got Kalinina, which is still a height, which will need to be taken. But the danger with the current situation in Chasiv Yar is that Ukrainians, without noticing, get completely overrun, which is what is happening right now. And then at the end, they are going to find themselves in the same situation they found themselves with Avdiivka, which is they were already done for. They had already lost the battle. What they were doing is just prolong this fatality, prolong the situation where they were lost, but they would rather die until finally they woke up and they said, okay, this is fucked up, we're moving out. And that, in my opinion, caused unnecessary losses for them. But once again, this is the problem with Ukrainians. Whereas the Russians would pull out too early, the Ukrainians will always pull out too late. So in this case, we got this logic where if Chasiv Yar falls within the next 2 months, and if Konstantinovka is submitted to the kind of treatment Avdiivka had, they will be forced to move out from the town by October, which in my opinion, October Konstantinovka in this case, which then would put Druzhkovka in danger. And as you know, between Konstantinovka and Sloviansk there are 45 kilometers, but between each 10 kilometers you got a big city, Kramatorsk, Druzhkovka, and then Konstantinovka. So I think right now the biggest problem the Ukrainians have is that, do they believe that the Russians are going to go all in for Chasiv Yar? I think they should believe that. But at the same time, you got the Russians running amok southwest of Avdiivka. So Pervomaiske fell. They're going to have Netalove. They are going to get Umansky. Once they get Umansky, they can go from the back and cut the Semenovka and then have completely the upper part towards Novobamutivka and then Attrition open. This with the small advance they did today on the railroad um, plus the advance up north in Novokalinove, indicates that the Russians are not done with the advance. And my plan, that I said, going towards Ocheretino, Novo, Alexandrivka, and then Berezivka, this is not going to change. It's just being done as a whole, with a whole plan, with a whole advancement, not a simple direction which would allow the Ukrainians to be able to concentrate all their defensive means on that area. No, these attacks are often described as failures, but there are cuts, there are saps on this trunk that is the Ukrainian defense. And at the end, the defense cracks. And when it cracks, you have the disarray that you had after Avdiivka. Now, is it deep? Honestly, I think I'm going to repeat myself. In-depth attacks like the first 2 months of 2022 are a thing of the past. Notably because the Ukrainians have the time now to create backlines, have the means to stall these attacks by FPVs, artillery, ATGMs, even if they need to employ their own tanks and EFVs, whatever you want. And most importantly, the Russians need to follow up with logistics. And that's the main reason right now. If you go back to the great big arrow offensives like early 2022, most of the time you're going to get bingo on supplies, fuel, ammunition, and then you're going to get picked easily. A whole company at the time, like it happened early 2022. Of course, this is a bit counterintuitive when you see the level of destruction that is happening, and you say, like, you are already losing quite a lot of assets for a shallow progress. What the fuck are you even saying? The problem, as I said, is that this small level of progress between 2 to 5 kilometers per week or 2 weeks in general directions also allows you to be able to sustain. So, of course, you're going to lose your tanks, but sometimes you can pull back and repair and refurbish. But also the enemy is fixated. You're not pursuing an enemy that's fleeing, that can disappear in the wild. Just look at the situation with Vozdesensky so in March 2022. One BTG pushed so far that it literally couldn't even recover its own vehicles after a few failed Ukrainian attacks. The MTO was so much back that they were literally encircled. They just didn't know it. They tried to fight for the city, but they could not be resupplied on time because meanwhile the troops that had scattered in front of them were reconcentrating on their backs, the Ukrainian troops. This is the same thing that we have right now with the Russians. The difference is, as I said, is that what they are doing is a very slow approach, using a lot of material equipment, but so far the ground has never been lost back. Since the counter is going to be 8 months now, nothing has been lost back. And I explained to you guys, when you analyze it properly, the Russians have never been so long in the offense as they are right now. Even during Bakhmut, it wasn't like this because they were strategically in defense from August 2022 to November 2022, even further to January 2023, if you want. So it's really the first time that the Russians are sustaining this kind of offensive initiative, and they're doing that, as I said again, in a rather large area of the front. And this is contributing to what we're seeing, which is an attrition on both sides, but an attrition that affects both sides differently. The Russians is bad, but they can still cope with it. Ukrainians can just not cope with the current type of attrition. And the fear on the Ukrainian side is that whatever is being built behind the lines is not enough. And as I said, if you started building too much defensive lines, you will need to man that at some point. If you don't man them, it makes no sense. So starting to man this, you're going to start fixating combat troops, or even meat, if you want to call it like that. But it's going to be 20,000, 40,000, 80,000. And this is the whole point that you didn't want to do. You didn't want to have these defenses fixated so the Russians can literally bomb them to shit with your MPKs. And on that, the FPV was great because it's literally a force multiplier. You can have a crew of 4 to 6 guys. If you check the most recent video from the Osman FPV group, you're going to see that 4 Ukrainians had a fuck ton of FPVs in a small shed. And then there were literally 4 to 6 guys. Now, those motherfuckers with 20, 30, 40 FPVs in there can stop 2, 3 attacks. And this is exactly how things are going to move. If you start fixating people, troops, you're going to lose them. Whereas finding the fuckers with the FPV is going to take more time and going to require a completely different approach. Anyway, one thing that is to be also noticed is that the Ukrainians are going to get at least one more Patriot battery from Germany. I do not think that the battery in question is a logical help from the Germans. They need to do something, which is why they're doing it. But as I said, we know by Russian footage that at least both components, the control components of the batteries they send to Ukraine, or at least partially for one, fully for another, have been lost. One has been lost at the infamous Iskander hit on the battery yielding and idling, and the other was in Kherson, where they were hidden in the barn. So the re-equipment with the new battery means that probably the new battery is going to take over from the battery who lost its ground control vehicle in its MSQ. Whereas the other battery still can be controlled, or still there is a way to deal with it. So basically, not the whole control system has been lost. Adding 8 more launchers is going probably to replace from what was lost, and a bit more, because we are sure about 5, 3 during the convoy and 2 at the barn. So yeah, you're gonna have extra 3, but the biggest problem, of course, is gonna be the missiles, because that's why the Ukrainians are eating. It's the missiles, and in the case of Germany, they are mostly PAC-2, which are more difficult to replace, despite the fact that Germany has an order. Those PAC-2s probably will have to go from the US in case of a replenishment is needed. Now, for the rest, as I said, the attrition war is going in a certain sense. It's not always funny. It's not always easy for everybody to appreciate it properly. But the logic that we're having is the following, is that the Ukrainians are holding the line by a thread. The Russians are holding the initiative, probably overheating a little bit. So the point is now who's going to break first. The Russian supply rhythm up to June, and then the Russians are, as I said, probably going to just look around them and say, okay, we are this far, let's keep going with our campaign of bombing, because that's the very positive things right now. The very positive thing right now with the Russians, that they can at some point leave 3, 4, 5, 6 days without a massive assault, because they're going to send you MPKs. And as I said, if you have 100, 200 UMPKs flying your way and taking out your rear, it doesn't matter how much you fucking think you're going to do with a counterattack, you are still going to lose assets. And it's going to be even worse if you start staging shit. Because now the Russians obviously know how to react faster, be that Iskander, Kh-35, Isdeli 85, Tornado S, UMPKs, you name it. And this is where I wanted to tell you guys that it seems to me that it's not about the help that the Ukrainians have or have not from the West. It's about the fact that they failed. They had their window in 2022, as I said. Whatever was there in 2023 was to push the Russians as far as possible in order then to have this backfield. We can see that they're doing a great job in Robotine, we have to admit. The Stalin is being eaten away by the Russians, but it's still gaining them a lot of time over there, and it's causing losses to the Russians as well. However, this also means, as I said, that an attack in Zaporozhye in the same salient now, in my opinion, is unbelievably stupid and impossible. But it was already so when they did it in 2023. And any other angle of attack that's remaining, as I said, I mocked the Bulgarian retard, Sasha Todorov, who said, okay, let's try from Krasnogorivka, because then, it wasn't very well defended and it was depleted and so on. I'm like, bro, you got Donetsk just next door. What depletion are you fucking talking about? You're going to go to Gorlovka, which is literally a murder zone, which the Ukrainians tried 2 attacks, seized 2 hills that were beaten back. Hello? So once again, the biggest problem we're having on the Ukrainian side of the affair is that they do not have the numbers, they do not have the capacity, they do not have the will to do it. And this is the first thing I'm seeing Ukrainians being so weak-willed when it comes to offensive operations. So what to expect for the upcoming days? I said it. A full stop in Karlivka. Probably some Russian troops at the edge of the reservoir. Full stop in Umanske, a downpour Umanske in the back of Semenovka, and then an advancement from Berdishi towards Novobamutivka, south of Ocheretine, and then a push from Novo Kalinovka towards Keramik and beyond Keramik towards the highway, relying Konstantinovka and Avdivka. They're not going to go very far there, probably 2 to 3 kilometers maximum, because it's way too open and it's literally a shooting alley. Ukrainians would just tank them. And both flanks there are problematic because, as you know, New York, Dzerzhinsk, Toretsk are still under Ukrainian control. So the Russians would just put themselves to death by having both sides shooting at it. This, of course, would also mean that the guys in Toretsk, New York, and Dzerzhinsk risk getting locked down in a cauldron. And that too needs to be watched by the Ukrainians. But I do not think that the Russians are going to try that bullshit. It's just too risky for them. And then, most important part, as I said, the advancement towards Ugledar. I know it's becoming a bad joke, but the advancement is there. Once Novomikhailovka is done, then you have a problem joining Ugledar, otherwise done from Kurakovo, and Kurakovo itself is gonna get attacked by UMPKs and shit. So honestly, I think the battle for Ugledar is going to be decided the moment Novomikhailovka falls. And then for the rest, it's always the same problem. The Ukrainians so far haven't mustered that can do anything else but stall the Russians and move back. There is a video, though, I want to speak to that a bit later, not today, when something funny is on Ukraine's T-72 M1s, and it looks a lot like the same type of Israeli alternative power units that Azerbaijanis had, they still have for the T-72 Aslan. If those APUs are starting to pop out, that means that the Ukrainians are going to start equipping their tanks with any kind of cover 2. Cover 2 means mobile electronic warfare against FPVs and other drones, which is indicating that they are still thinking about the counteroffensive as I said, probably a lot more limited to avoid what I just said, which is a pour back from Umanske in the rear of Semanovka. And this would, of course, allow the Russians to move across the fields from south to north under Cheretine. And once they seize Cheretine, basically the whole defensive system of Cheretine, Keramik, Dzerzhinsk, Toretsk, and so on is fucked. Because you got a stab in your armor where the Russians are going to exploit both flanks. And then they can move towards progress. Once they're towards progress, it's fucked. It's literally fucked because they're going to bypass two of your biggest trenches and you're going to have them on both of your sides, which would push whatever troops you have around them to pull them in the area and start and try to repel the Russians, which means weakening other parts of the front. I think they would like to leave Ternia and Polivka free because finally the Russians cannot run amok over there instead of abandoning the Kupiansk area. So in this case, I think that the Ukrainians can still make some less damaging choices for themselves if the things go the worst way possible around the Berdichino, Bamutivka, Ocheretine axis. Sorry if it was a little bit dense at the end. If you have any kind of interventions, please, it's up to you. But I'm going to be extremely short because this, at the beginning, this was set just for a small Donetsk update, and then it happened what happened. So I could not speak about that. It's up to you guys. Go on, Ali. It's up to you, man.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course I can hear you.
Yeah, hello. No, I just wanted to add a few stuff about the Iranian ballistic missile strike that you said. But I do agree with you. It is first and foremost proof of concept strike. But the thing is about the interception rates. Yeah, it might be high, but what it appears to be is that the Iranians have used the cheapest shit they had. Like the main thing they have been working on for the last years is like producing and reaching Israel with a modified Scud missile engine. And they have been successful in 2022, and they call the missile Rizwan missile, Rizwan. And basically, it is accurate, but it doesn't have the maneuvering capabilities of like more advanced solid ballistic missiles or liquid ballistic fueled ballistic missiles, nor the hypersonic. But the thing is, as you said, it's like it's about the second strike. If it had came, they would be in a very, very bad position. The thing is with the intervention is that like the whole ISR, the whole U.S. presence in the region was aimed at at the Iranian strike, and it does actually put the Israelis in a very, very bad position. So it just like reminds them, okay, so this is Iran, but Hezbollah has
Hello?
shorter range missiles. So at the end of the day, like people are also so like protesting the fact that okay,
No, I'm hearing you. It's just like I lost you, like usual. Elon does
huh?
the. No, I'm saying that I just lost you. That's why I asked if you were still there because Twitter is going to shit. So sometimes I lose you. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that the thing is with the Iranian ballistic missiles, they have like a newer model of solid ballistic missiles as well that are very cheap. And the thing is with I've read something about the numbers of interceptors the Israelis had, like the Arrow 3. The Americans, they had.
Guys, are you still there? Because again, Twitter is literally doing shit, and I basically cannot hear. But just so if you still hear me, I completely agree with you, Ali. I'm going to let you speak again, just so you know, to know if you can hear me or not. Can you hear me? Okay, because Ali, I cannot hear you. I'm going to try to invite you again, but to reply just shortly to what you said, yes, I completely agree, and I already said this morning when I had this exchange with a former friend that now has gone to the Ukrainian side. Um, if you see what was shot down in Jordan, it doesn't look at all like a top dog missile. And even if it was a top dog missile, the biggest problem that the Israelis have right now is that it's something past. And there you got the problem. Once one is gone through, you're gonna have a second going through. And I invited you again, Ali, because I know that I lost you for some reason. I invited you again. Just accept the invitation. But the most important part that I have as a problem with Israel right now is that I didn't saw anything convincing to me that the Arrow 3 was bulletproof. You need also for other people, because Ali, I'm pretty sure that he understands what I'm saying. Israelis have been sold the Arrow as like untouchable. Yes, I can hear you. I reinvited you because I lost you for a while, but please go.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why I was interrupted. Did it arrive like how many missiles the Israelis
Yeah,
probably?
go on from there. Go on from there. I'm sorry that I don't know what happened, but as usual, Twitter goes to shit.
Ah, yeah. No, no worries. I just finished my point. The thing is, like, I think the Iranians are did benefit a lot from this. Not you know, not only from a technical standpoint, but also from a geopolitical standpoint. Like,
Okay, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but you're being cut, Ali. I don't know. I'm not touching anything. But I'm gonna say as once again, I completely agree with you. If someone wants to know how much the Iranians are benefiting from this in the Arab world, just fucking look a couple of videos from Palestinians themselves. One of them was very funny. You got a Palestinian and said, "Listen, listen, no planes, no drones, no nothing." So the benefit for them, even though short-lived, is that the Iranians were doing exactly what nobody else did for them. And we're speaking about the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, of course, but I will.
Ballistic missiles, like they can even have the Jericho ballistic missile conventional warhead that's run just to prove a point. But from there, I wouldn't know where things will go. So yeah, that was
It's more than a technical aspect, as you said. It's a lot more important that just the ability to go through the Jericho, the David Sling, the arrow, whatever. Most important part, I think, right now is that politically, the Iranians enter the discussion among the Arab world, the Muslim world. They were already always in discussion, but because they were Shias, there was always this, barrier there, except for the Palestinians and the Lebanese. But now you see the Egyptians looking at these missiles striking to Israel, and you look, you're an Egyptian, you turn around and you look at your own government, and you're like, okay, I get the Camp David accords and agreements, but look at what's going on. We are at the doorstep. We're not doing anything because, of course, there is this fealty to the U.S. and there is money coming from there. But this is bound to change mentally the Arab world to a point where, unfortunately, sorry if I say so, and God knows that I'm not a proponent of Al Qaeda, but only Osama bin Laden had been done in 2001. So this is a huge danger for Israel because for now, up until now, okay, you had Al Qaeda with, or at least what was said to be Al Qaeda with the Twin Towers, but now you got the state. you got a country striking what is unfortunately for the Arab world an open wound now for 80 years. And these guys, okay, they did it for a different reason. They did it with a lot of limitations. There is not going to be a follow-up immediately because there's a fuck ton of countries to cross, and there's a logistical trail that's, I think, it's the biggest problem right now. But they did it. And of course, we had this joke about team happening, nothing happens. But the reality is that beyond the technical approach, they just pulled the fucking trigger. And it's this escalation of doing something has been absolutely mental on the Iranian side. MQ-9, RQ-170, RQ-4, attacks on American targets, of course, choreographed and telegraphed, of course, but still they did it. Second attacks on the same base, then hit on Israel, once again, telegraphed, choreographed, but still very important. We are witnessing something that it's a sleepwalk escalation in the region, and nobody's even like saying anything. Like, okay, fine. And I said, what if Israel literally goes apeshit and does something that everybody's going to regret? Who is going to stop them? Because the Americans say something, okay, Biden said, okay, only military targets were hit, but I don't think that Biden's going to think twice if the Israelis decide to attack Iran and would like to have the refueling tankers. Biden's going to say, yes, and how much and how far and what do you want? It has been a systematic own goal from the American administrations, and didn't matter which one, Obama, Trump, Biden. Just very simple. Bush was even worse. I mean, like, we are into a logic where something needs to change in the region. I wouldn't say that what needs to change that the Israelis get sent back to the sea, because that would be a groundbreaking event with consequences from the Western world. That would, as I said, it would be a way worse spiral than the Russians winning in Ukraine. Because unfortunately, as I say, there is a shaming of the Western world due to what happened during World War II with the Hebrew population of Europe in general, which has been ingrained now in the public discourse in Europe, and it is what it is. You're going to have a backlash on that. Therefore, the logic here is to find any kind of solution which would not go there, because if it goes there, then there is no coming back from there. It doesn't matter who wins that part, because we are going to restart honestly, sorry to say it with this word, it would be a crusade without the name. And the only thing it's going to bring back is this logic of tutelage that Europe had over the Near East and Middle East since the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And I do not see any positive coming out of that. It's just more shame and humiliation, but with the difference that now there is a second guy. Before it was Soviet Union, but now you got the Chinese power that for the Arabs would be, I'm sorry to say, given their huge productivity advantage, given now with the forced/desired alliance with the Russians, given that Russia and the OPEC still hold a huge sway when it comes to the oil pricing. It's literally, if we go there, everything is going to lie against the West in the long term, which I'm not sure that anybody in Europe wants. Maybe in America, because they are completely fanatic about Israel, but generally speaking, Europeans would be the biggest losers. And one of the biggest problems would be that you would lose Turkey immediately at that point, because we can have Erdogan, whoever is going to succeed him, say bullshit and do bullshit. But unfortunately, the Muslim population in Turkey has it extremely bad when they see what the Israelis are allowed to do. Let's not forget that when Turks do anything to the Kurds in a way or another, they are fucking ostracized. When the Israelis literally commit acts of genocide toward the Palestinians, it's all good and fine because it's self-defense. And this thing, as I said, is bound to create a huge rift within the components of NATO. When I'm literally speaking about Turkey here, and you're gonna literally put a line at the Bosphorus. I don't know, and I'm not sure that anybody would be happy about that. That Turkey goes east, because then Israel has no other way except the sea. So basically, Italy or Crete. And you know what's going on at that point, because the Turks have views on the area, and you are going to create a problem and a chain reaction of opportunism where there was none. Okay, the Turks yap and the Greeks reply, but everybody sits fine and cool because it's the same alliance and they're all depending on each other. But once you create that rift, I do not see the Turks thinking twice, especially with what's going on with the Russians. So, in my opinion, Ukraine versus the Middle East, or at least what might happen if things go to shit, it's incomparable. And I really think that we need to think this through, us in the West. The Americans, in a sense, as I said, they have this problem, this mental problem with Israel. But Europe needs to really think it's true, because we are going to end up to a point when we have the Germans right now, which are literally wagged by some toothless idiot at the European Parliament, who says that we should give 7 Patriot batteries to Ukraine to resist the Russian assaults and Russian attacks. But at the same time, nobody has them or wants to give them. So Germany now is forced to literally be shamed into doing something which is not enough. It's probably going to backfire, because the Ukrainians within 3 months are going to lose that battery as well, given the way they use almost every shit that they get. And we are just going deeper and deeper in this rabbit hole of shaming and moral coercion that's happening with most of the European leadership, where, as I said, we can probably make even worse decisions. Or at least the European leadership is going to make worse decisions when it comes to the Middle East or the Near East. And in this case, mostly guided by the U.S. leadership. I mean, we now know, at least it was announced, that British airplanes were flying from Akrotiri to Jordan to intercept Iran missiles. And I'm like, okay, but you cannot do that for Ukraine. It's not that what I want them to do. It's just like this clearly double standard when it comes to your objectives with Israel and then Ukraine is awful. And this is what I'm saying, that the problem that we're going to see is that a lack of depth of thinking when it comes to where we go from here. And as I say, Near East, Middle East has a lot more danger than Ukraine, Russia, although the nuclear trigger in the Russia question is a lot thinner. But due to this distance between both foes, in this case, Iran and Israel, only a intervention from a larger force can allow one of the two sides, which is the case is Israel, to come closer to Iran. Therefore, you're going to literally paint this as a civilizational war, and it's going to be, again, Muslims in the West. This is what I said, that it's going to be a fucking crusade without the name. And this is exactly what led to the major counter reaction from the Muslim world, which gave movements like Al Qaeda. So it's geostrategic mindlessness on the Western part, and the idea is to fucking let go of Israel in a way or another, while also not completely kicking it out of the region. Israel, what should be done with Israel, or how Israel should coexist in the region. I'm just saying, when you look at it from the West, you have this problem where Israel right now is a complete pariah with that area, despite whatever collaboration with Jordan, with United Emirates and so on. The people on the street don't like them, they don't want them there, despite the fact that Jews were living in Muslim countries. The politicization of this situation is so high that there is no coming back from this, especially since the 7th of October. Sorry if it was long, guys, but just it was a couple of thoughts about how I absolutely see this going sideways if nobody reigns in Israel. And as I said, unfortunately, that makes of Iran the only adult in the room. The problem is that Iran doesn't want to be an adult anymore because it has been, humiliated in a sense way too often for reasons that nobody understands, like the atomic issues. First, the EIA agreement, then the EIA breach from the US, which pulled back. We are into this logic of self-importance on the West, especially on the US side, which leaves, I'm sorry, if I was Iran, I would be fucking bewildered by what happened since 2003. Yet there we are, and they are the ones that are supposed to be the adults in the room, that whatever goal, political goal they have, original goal they have, they need to put it under wrap because Israel needs to thrive. I'm sorry to say it like this. So yeah, guys, sorry. Up to you. If someone else wants to intervene, please, guys. Okay. If nothing else is to be said, as I said, please, guys, check the last week of April. I think it's going to be decisive on how the Ukrainians are going to treat their own war. First of all, because of the... okay, we got Finnick. Go on, man. Finnick, please. Finnick, je mag praten, gast. Finnick, if you hear me, you can talk, man. Finnick, can you hear me? Yeah, you may speak. You asked for your time. The floor is yours, man. Go on. Finnick? Okay, I don't know what's going on with my buddy. Bro, you may talk. I don't know if you are talking or not. I see you still with the mic cut. Please go on, man.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. Ukrainian media has, for the past week or so, been talking a lot about a potential opening of a new front by the Russians in the Kharkov direction. They're kind of sowing panic within their own people by talking about evacuating villages and whatnot. I was wondering what your own take on this is.
Oh, it's very simple. I think you have heard that in the group. There's for the moment, no indication that the Russians have the spare force to do anything there. What the Russians are doing, though, and which is like the most basic thing, has been going on for now 6 months. The Russians are literally trying out their bombing campaign there, and since apparently at least the S-300 battery was vaporized in Konstantinovka in Kharkov, they are literally dropping UMPBs, Key-35s, all that shit, and it doesn't seem to stop. Now, is this a preparation for an attack on Kharkov? I really don't believe so. I'm going to tell you, I always say multiple times, you would need a literally second army when it comes to Kharkov, because it's that big, it's that important for both sides, especially for Ukrainians, because it's a huge cluster. You can, if you lose the city itself, I'm not speaking about a couple of townships around it. If you lose the city itself, you are going to lose probably the biggest hub next to Kiev when it comes to transport staging, preparation for troops, but also you're going to lose the second city of Ukraine, as simple as that. So I think that probably the Russians are going to do something about Kharkov at some point this year. I do not believe it. As I said, I would believe that Kharkov would be an option the moment when I see the Russian tank production going back to what I think it would be by now, which is still not there. And I'm not speaking about refurbishment. I said multiple times that I would like to have the Russian leadership go back to a two-tank production, which is restart the T-80 production, and then go on for a simplified turret for the refurbished tanks, especially because there's still a fuck ton of T-72 A hulls or B hulls that can still be used, despite the fact that the turret needs a deeper reconditioning because of cracks, because of the infiltrations in the general structure. But mostly what I would like to say that without this step up in production, and not speaking only about tanks, it has to be BMPs, it has to be new BTRs, because right now none of the BTRs they have can cut it, honestly. I would not be talking about Kharkov. However, what's going on, which is true, is that they are softening up that front, and the Ukrainians are reacting with something that's very strange, and as I said, which is completely trenching that sector. But as I said, the problem when you trench any kind of sector, they already had done that in 2022, they were bypassed pretty fast. Because they didn't have the troops for it, because of the Russians were all in, and so on and so on. My biggest problem with the Ukrainians right now is that all this panic, I think initially was meant to, call for more AD, more weapons, more ammunition. But what's going on, especially with the way they're fucking up their mobilization campaign, what's going on is that they are simply making it extremely difficult for their own population to support whatever is being proposed, be that on mobilization, when initially they said that they're going to demob at least 150,000 people, but they cannot do that because they don't have the reserve for the forces they have at hand. Then they said a certain level of coercion would be still maintained in the mobilization law, but it's not there. So basically what happens is that a lot of people can still avoid conscription in the other way or the other, but that means that for a lot of soldiers who are still active and who are going to still be on the trenches instead of being demobilized, these guys are still going to be out there because all the loops and nooks and crannies they were using to avoid the TCK, the military commissars, they're going to still be available. The only thing is that on paper, some things are supposed to be changing, but they're not going to change. And therefore, this is my biggest problem right now, is that it doesn't matter what people think about the Ukrainian PR when it comes to the threat from Russia. There are open signs that it's something that is, for once, extremely weird, which is the Ukrainians playing themselves into a position of weakness when it comes to the PR game. Usually they have a on-point PR. You know that we often complain about the fact that the Russians do not have that game on point, but Ukrainians have it so good that a lot of people still believe that Ukrainians are dominating on the battlefield. The problem, once again, is that if you want to know when Kharkov is going to happen, is when a lot of troops on the line, so Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, are going to get pulled back completely and go back towards Balaklia. Then you're going to know that Kharkov is going to happen. But so far, there's no even a thought about this because Ukrainians do not feel the risk on Kharkov itself. Evacuating because of shelling, well, the Russians did it in Belgorod, but it didn't mean that the Ukrainians were going to take over Belgorod. This attempt during the mid-March was probably the best evidence on how poor and how poorly thought these attempts are generally, because they didn't make it even past 400 meters in Russian territory, and they just were wasted. So a bit like you, as you said, it's a lot of PR, but if you want signs that things are going to happen, it's very simple. Look at new tank production, look at new types of vehicles and weapons being fielded, and also look at new units. Because Kharkov is going to require at least 100,000 K as the minimum of frontline troops. I'm not saying rear troops support and so on, but if you want to deal with the city itself, you will have to do a lot better than what was done with Kiev, which was nowhere near, and yet was accordingly the biggest contingent that was used. Just the same for Kharkov. You're going to have to use a huge amount of troops, and also you're going to see the bombardment for the city going extremely fast, up, and up. And right now, despite everything that's been called, the Kharkov area gets what, 20, 30 UMPKs per day? It's just the norm at this point. They are complaining that Chasov Yar is getting 80 per day for now a week. So how true it is, of course, it's a completely different thing. But if they're not complaining in Kharkov as much as they're complaining for Chasov Yar, then you know what needs to be said about the real risk for the city. Sorry if it was long, but I'm done. If you have something to add, then I'm gonna have Nimrod follow up. G, it's up to you, man.
I just wanted to say that whatever defense the Israelis have, and it doesn't matter if they have the whole support of the West, if the leadership keeps being disregarded and keeps being this hasty, they can have thousands of interceptors. If the Iranian side really hates them, they're going to get them, like they seize the ship. I mean, nobody even talks about. Everyone talks about the massive strike, but Iranians can find other ways to hurt Jews, and we saw that the Jewish economies training. And
yes, that was all. I completely agree with you. That was one of the biggest part of the equation, is that we can speak about how many things we want about Israel. If you see the 60 billion loss in GDP in about 4 months, then you understand where the Achilles heel of the Israeli state is. And I'm sorry to cut you, Nimrod, but that's a point that I wanted to raise, because everybody is literally screaming and kicking Israel, especially when it comes to the Eilat port. They have already fired, or at least laid about half of the port employees, and then they're also thinking about laying off at least 20% of contractors of the same port, which would absolutely blow a hole into the whole Israeli budget, because and it's the same for Egypt, by the way. Egypt says that revenues from the Suez Canal have dropped 40-50%, which is also major. But for Israel, it's extremely important because one of the diversification of their economy, except for high tech and other stuff, was literally using the port of Eilat as a safe transfer, both inside Israel, but also for other purposes, especially for the some Turkish transfers that could not be done directly. Turks with third-party storage over there. Anyway, it's a bit of a longer explanation, but the thing is that with Eilat going down, the state of Israel is going down, and unfortunately, as I said, this is not even due to the Houthis themselves, because the attacks, when you analyze it properly, are really small. It's really due to the fact that nobody wants to start paying premium on the transport. Go on, man, because I cut you.
The other thing is that when we talk about, interceptions, I mean, yes, you say that, it's nuclear tipped, but I mean, how many times, the America and the West can pull this out for Israel? Like, stationing ships and use Jordan as a AD zone. I mean, will they do it on the next attack? Yeah, it's also uncertain at this point. Like, will they do the same, like, say, 3 years later? Because they did it now, and the numbers were good, relatively good, but not perfect. And the danger of the nuclear warhead is always there. And that uncertainty is, I mean, the biggest question. Like, what if Israel truly is alone for, just a brief moment? I mean, and that is the nightmare scenario for them, I think.
Yeah, that's also the thing that I believe as well. It's like how much are you going to put on the line for Israel? Unfortunately, as I said, I think for the Americans, they can sustain this not at the same intensity, but they can sustain this up to a certain point when they're going to decide to attack Iran, so Iran stops doing it. And this is the biggest danger. And this is why I spoke about America literally creating the conditions for its own little adventure in the area. The difference is, as I said, is that Iran today is not Iraq back in 1990 or 2003, especially in the current, political and geopolitical context. Because the first thing that's going to happen if the Americans want to go at war with Iran, they will have to go at war. It's not the Iranians that are going to fucking park ships at the Potomac and attack Washington D.C. So once again, it's going to be a long period of projection. This projection is going to have to happen first in Saudi Arabia and then to Iraq. But it means that every ship that's going to go, I don't know, in Doha, that's going to go in Medina, that's going to park anywhere in the Red Sea or Persian Gulf is going to be fucking incendiated. And it doesn't matter how many times the Americans are going to try and take out the ballistic missiles, the drones, and all that stuff. That area is gone. We are seeing it with Ukraine. And despite the fact that the Americans are going to be a lot better equipped than the Russians, generally speaking, in order to have this regime change, it's not a praying mantis, it's not 1987 anymore. And this is the biggest problem I have. If the Americans want to load the bases at the Red Sea or at the Persian Gulf, it's going to be a fucking shooting alley. And even if the Americans manage to prevail in the sense that they manage to avoid large casualties getting through, they would still have to invade from Iraq. And that would mean that they would have to go through Basra, which has a very large Shia population. And I'm sorry, but that would be honestly the biggest suicide move ever. Not only is going to alienate Iraq generally, but it's going to cause them to have to fight before even entering Iran. So once again, we have this discussion of how mentally and geopolitically fit is the US administration. So far, it has been okay. They haven't done anything stupid. Of course, with Ukraine, some reckless stuff has happened. But if they want to risk themselves into a small regional war with Iran, by also, because this is the biggest difference, Iraq was, as I said, boxed, and nobody wanted to help them in 90, and in 2003 it was just the same. But now we're going to have Iran, which will have a backyard with Kazakhstan, with Russia, and that means if they want something from China, even in I'd say, non-military cooperation-wise, they're going to get it, because it would be the easiest thing for the Chinese to take their main competitor out without even firing a shot. Ironically, and this is something that it's weird. Ironically, the U.S. is finding itself a bit like the USSR at the end of its existence, when it had to put down fires that didn't need to be put down. Afghanistan, troubles in the Caucasus with Azeri and Armenian issues, its adventures in Angola as well. So all this, I don't know, I don't want to make real parallel comparisons, but it literally feels like the U.S. is undergoing what the Soviet Union was having between 79 and 91. And in this case, of course, it's not that comparable in the sense that the USSR was really going bankrupt, in the sense that they didn't control the destiny because they were actually a weak economy. But the US is controlling its debt, its printing, and therefore they are not seeing the reality in the eye. But the moment when they're, as I say, if they do this stupid thing and try to have an invasion in Iran, then the domino effect is going to be fully in effect ultimately. And they're going to lose all the investment they had in the Middle East. But of course, this is it's hypothetical. I do not see the Americans doing it right now unless they have a death wish. But who knows? With Trump, and given how Trump has had the hard on for Iran, maybe the Americans are going to be that stupid, and hopefully, I'm sorry to say it like this, we're going to get done with this hegemonic and reckless policy that the USA has established in that area of the world, and of course in Europe. Kremlin, I'm going to add you as well. Go on, man. Yo, Kremlin, you can
Yes,
go on, man.
thanks. Like you kind of hit the nail on the head on what I was saying, and basically what I was blabbering in one of my spaces last night. The problem right now is that, in a way, like for Iran, obviously a full-on conflict. Israel is a. I don't want to oversimplify it, but Israel is kind of a non-issue. Like the issue is the United States. Israel basically just sucks cocks as by itself. It basically sucks cocks. It's nothing, right? The issue is the United States. For Iran, it would kind of suck to have an actual conflict with the United States. However, as you said, this is the golden scenario for both Russia, that is now itching to do the same shit that the United States is doing to them, right? And for China, man, oh man, sweet baby Jesus. Like the United States, basically the only way they can get to China is through their navy. The main factor in their fight with Iran is also their navy. It's basically like forcing them to show their little gun and having somebody else take it from their hand. It is beautiful, and I'm sure China is willing to. Bro, they're gonna send everything. Like, just look at it. Just think about it. Yeah, you're gonna park 3, 4 aircraft carriers. They're gonna send whatever it takes to sink those aircraft carriers, right? And that's gonna be an absolute shit show for the U.S. because the U.S. has been seen in the last 3 decades as this unstoppable force. Sinking an aircraft carrier is like nuking a city. Blah blah blah, and it's going to happen, and it's gonna suck. And then they're gonna realize, just like you said, just flying over Iran and trying to do shit like those planes. Okay, you're gonna fly, you're gonna launch some ordnance, you're gonna hit something maybe, but then you have to land. You have to land on an airstrip, right? And you will not be able to perform another mission for 16 to 24 hours with that jet. 16 to 24 hours is enough to fucking hit it. That's the thing. They will overwhelm the defense. Like the United States does not have the air defense that, at least not in that region, that Ukraine had, right? And you can wither it away. Slowly but surely wither it away. And then you can fucking hit any fucking airfield. Any fucking airfield. Easy, right? And that means all these aircraft. And then it means they have to do the most shitty thing, just like you said. They have to go on the ground. Bro, going on the ground, like anyone who knows, who like pulls up a map of Iran right now, its topology, understands that going on the ground, bro, like Ukraine kind of sucks because of the land right over there because it gets muddy and shit. But Iran is basically a wall of mountains, right? And if you're going to go with some armored vehicle and think you're going to go fast, like you're going to do your, what was it called, thunder roll in Iraq, you have no fucking idea. You're going to move slow, you're going to be a big target, and they're going to see like what FPV drones can do to their shit. They're going to see firsthand, and it's going to be fucking humiliating. It's going to be an absolute debacle. And yeah, some people are going to die in Iraq, in Syria, probably in Iran. But hey, like the wounds that this shit can put on the United States and their army, man. I mean, just look at it this way. Just think of it like the recent history. They pull out of Afghanistan shamefully. They will launch this war against the so-called gas station with nuclear weapons, and they're basically getting BTFO'd in terms of ammo production. Then they go against these so-called savages, bearded savages in the desert, and then you see you see their aircraft carriers sunk, a few of them, airfields hit, and then you see the Thunder run, all basically looking the same like Iraq's what was it, Highway of Death. Man, that's fucking humiliating. And once you have that sort of humiliation, people tend to kind of like understand, okay, bro, maybe this is the end of an era. If you're South Korea, if you're Japan, if you're obviously even the population that is still pro US in Taiwan, you're gonna see this and be like, I don't know, man. It doesn't feel like being buddy buddies right now is a good idea. Also, another scenario that you did not raise, that I kind of raised last night, was people were talking about, oh, the U.S. is going to go and nuke Iran. If they do that, that opens Pandora's box. That basically means, hey, it's acceptable. Like this is the second time the United States is doing it. It's acceptable to hit targets with nuclear weapons, right? Oh, you're repairing Ukrainian aircraft in a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons, say Poland. Tough luck, Poland. Yeah, we know you're part of NATO, but you're gonna get fucking nuked. Like the United States just did that. It is what it is, man. And then every country that doesn't have their own nuclear weapons to basically threaten to hit back is fair game. Germany, fair game. Turkey, fair game. Everyone becomes fair game after that for nuclear weapons. Japan, you start fucking around, you get nuked. If Kim thinks like, oh, I feel threatened by South Korea, tough luck. Seoul's gonna get nuked. They can't open that Pandora's box because it's gonna be way worse for them. You know, it's kind of a shitty situation. It's bad for Iran, but in the grand scheme of things, for let's say the sort of axis of evil as they call it, a U.S. intervention in Iran or in the region, let's say Syria, Iraq, is what they want. I'll be honest with you. I think this is what they want. And I'm just going to land it there. Thanks.
And I completely agree with you. And honestly, for people who don't know me from before this war, unfortunately, my original account was nuked. But in 2014, in November, I had made a thread over a potential U.S. assault because, as you may recall, there was a deadlock over the Iranian deal, and the Israelis wanted absolutely to fuck it up. And at the same time, the Israelis had a war with Hamas in Gaza in 2014. And I had made a thread about how a potential U.S. invasion would look in 2014, so 10 years ago. Now, of course, we're 10 years after. We have the Iranians having everything that you need to suppress, in a way or another, a ground invasion. These assholes have a huge country. Guys, I love you. Don't take it personally. Sometimes I say the same for the Russians. They have a huge country. It's a plateau, so basically you cannot afford to come too close to a whole area of regions. A plateau is basically, as you said, a wall of mountains, but that overlook valleys. And it's not just as simple as to go to Tehran. For people who have the gaming passion, think about what Battlefield 3 was being sold as in, I don't know when it was, 2010, 2011. Well, forget about all of that because you have a complete different approach of the war. But basically, the US would be forced to go through four main highways that all converge towards Tehran. And without a complete domination of the sky in 2014, I said that they would have been dealing with a lot of ATGM all over the way. But now, having the Iranians having the Almas, the FPVs, the all types of Shahids, the Arash, all this shit, plus drones, makes it extremely difficult, especially given how the US back then already had not that much theater air defenses, except, of course, the airplanes. But now you don't even need that with such a big country. What you need is to absolutely make sure that there are no FPVs on the way, no foot mobiles with ATGMs, and of course that you cannot even suppress their supplies because you can see already with Ukraine that you can fucking do wonders with a bunch of SUVs. 4,000 or 5,000 SUVs are enough for roughly 20,000 people to move around, and 20,000 people to start hitting around a rather large quadrant of people, of land, is going to take months. Just look once again at Gaza. It's a very small territory proportionally when you compare that with any oblast or half oblast in Ukraine. It's taking 6 months and it's not done. So imagine that, multiply that by 100, and you got the logic on how bad things can turn for the US military. And I said, you don't even need to lose a lot of people, you just need to lose on your invasion force 30,000 killed and about 80 to 90,000 wounded. And whatever you're going to send to Iran as a force, you're going to be already 10% less of the total force and about 20% less of your fighting force. And you know that the threshold for any kind of tactical elimination of the cohesion of your squad is 30%. And you're just, if in 6 months you are already down to 20%, well, you know what's going on. We know what's going to happen. But the biggest problem when it comes to America is that the ground forces are extremely motorized and mechanized. Given how badly the Russians are getting beaten on the motorization part by any kind of tool, artillery, FPVs, ATGMs, and so on, you may start believing that the Americans are going to have just the exact same problem. And I'm not even talking about EFP booby traps, IEDs, all that shit. I'm just saying, once again, just FPVs and ATGMs of any kind of logic. And then you're going to have more traditional foot mobiles with RPGs, people who are ready to die, because that's also one thing that people need to understand. When I say martyrdom is victory, that was literally a slogan of the Basiji in the Iran-Iraq war. You're going to have those guys going against you now. I know that it doesn't make any sense to, claim that it's going to be the secret weapon, the game changer, but people with that kind of mentality are going to be extremely difficult to stop. And it doesn't matter how much technology you put against them. You just run away from the same kind of guys in Afghanistan. Now imagine that with 4 times the population in Iran. Plus, trust me, guys, the moment you go to this holy war principle in Iran, a lot of people are going to start pouring in Afghanistan, Pakistan, fucking Iraq. And you're just going to kick a hornet's nest. And this is the thing with America. They have no good options on the ground. They have zero good options on the ground. Even if they prevail over a large part of the Iranian territory, they're going to have to deal with insurgency. They're also going to have to deal with logistics. Your logistics to go to Iran, if they don't come from Central Asia, they're going to have to come through Iraq. Just think about it. But anyway, the general norm here, this is when I want to stop the point, is exactly what you said. For the Chinese, that kind of war, be that parking the civilians in the Persian Gulf or in the Red Sea, and then trying to have troops going through Iraq into Iran, this is like, I mean, it's the best gift ever. It's exactly what the Americans saw when the Russians committed to a ground invasion in Ukraine. They said, okay, it's time to literally raise the Russian military from the ground, and they went full on with that idea. Then the Chinese are going to go full on with that idea. Of course, they're not going to start sending artillery and equipment the way the Americans are doing in Ukraine. They're just going to do what they are doing for the Russians right now. And trust me, that's going to already be putting quite a dent into the American capabilities, especially when it's going to come to the FPVs. Especially that, FPVs, ATGMs, subcomponents for ATGMs. I mean, if anything, instead of having Almaz, which is already an optical fiber ATGM, they're going to have optical fiber FPVs. Easy, unjammable, because it's a physical link, and even if the warhead is smaller, it's going to make a lot of fucking damage. And on that, I have no problem, as I said, being 100% with you and saying, fuck it, it's game on. Okay, Gremlin, I'm
Yeah,
letting
just
you.
short. I'm gonna be short because while you like basically what you were saying, obviously, if the Chinese go in, then they think they can do a tit for tat against Russia, right? They're going to be like, oh, we're really going to send the good stuff to Ukraine. Problem is, once the war kicks in over there, those straits are fucked. Oil prices are going to skyrocket, and not just that. And then all these countries that think they're going to build all this equipment and send it to Ukraine, man, oh man, are they going to have an economic surprise? Because it's easy right now to talk about creating stuff, building stuff, and shipping it to Ukraine. But once the barrel hits $200, it's going to be a totally different reality. Production is going to be crippled, especially in Europe, and probably in the US, it's going to take a hit. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, of course. That's the byproduct of this war. We're right here. We were just talking about the tactical aspect of it. Okay, Ray 404, up to you, man.
I was gonna say that I think people need to realize all the pieces are already in place. So you talk about North Korea, but North Korea's military, they already ready all to go in. Surovikin has been in Algeria, in Syria for the last 10 months, 8 months. Iran, Yemen, it is about them setting up infrastructure for water drones. So if США, if USA fleet has issues, they can instantly get sunk. At this point, there is no more, putting chess pieces in place. There is only escalation management. It's only until people start shooting.
Yeah. But on that aspect, even if it's not exactly like you say, the problem right now is that every single concept we've seen by one side or the other, let's say the water USVs, water drones from Ukraine, or the double tandem from Russia with Zala and Lancet, and Zala and Iskander and so on, the use of UKs by Iran and so on. Every single concept is already there. And as you said, the point is making the linkage through all these concepts, all these operational capabilities, and just going at it. The advantage for the Iranians when it comes to a potential war is that it's going to be on their home turf. So they're going to have most of the reverse initiatives, as we say, in the sense that they're gonna welcome the Americans. They're gonna know when the Americans gonna be there. They're gonna know where to attack, how to attack. The Americans, despite the fact that in a chess game would have to play whites, for them playing whites would be already starting when the deployment, when with the strategic deployment of forces, projection, logistics, and so on. So the war for the Americans does not start when they are already at the door of the Iranian forces. It starts when they're gonna come close. And this is the biggest problem, and I agree with you in the sense that it's just escalation management. But the logic overall right now, we're not seeing that yet because the deployment, the US deployment is at least 4 to 6 months away for a minimum of 200,000 people. And that's the strict minimum to do anything next to Iran. But if you want to really subdue the country or do whatever, you're going to have 500,000. That thing doesn't get done in 2 weeks. It would require, as I said, 6 months if we base ourselves in Desert Storm, given the equipment, given the capabilities, and so on. And the biggest problem is that by the moment you start there, the Iranians are starting to counterplan contingencies, where to hide, how to react. The Iranians right now, as I said, they're not the Iraqis in 1990. They're not the Iraqis in 2003. They get access to SATCOM, SAT images. They have their own local ISR. And this ISR is not only like the big drones they're using, it's everything. Zala type drones, Orlan type drones, bigger, smaller, FPV type drones, DJI type drones. And the biggest advantage is that, as I said, whereas we had this DJI culture, auto culture in Ukraine, because you could afford premium consumer grade capabilities, with the Iranians it's going to be completely different. These guys will not give a shit if they use pieced together DJI style drones that cost a tenth of the price of actual DJI. And they are able to mount their own components to deal with their own situation on a very adversarial system and ecosystem. Whereas the US right now, despite everything they're seeing in Ukraine, we do not see any kind of application of this momentum. Most of the USMC, because probably the USMC are going to be the first to knock on the Iranian door, let's say it like this, they are still at the same level that the Russians were in 2022 when it comes to drones, FPVs, and general surveillance drones. Like, it seems like for a lot of people in Europe and the West, the war in Ukraine is not real. Whereas they are still mocking the Russians who are mounting a pyramid of EV just to stop FPVs because that's their daily life, you know? So I agree with you that it's going to be a escalation management, but at the same time, we are not there yet because simply, I think, in my honest opinion, that the US cannot afford that kind of escalation. And I'm not saying militarily, I'm saying fiscally, I'm saying financially. They cannot start a 150 billion war per 1 or 2 months that risk escalating into 2 or 3 years and would completely blow up the defense budget. And it also forced the Americans to rethink how they think about the war themselves. Because as I said, if you are dropping 500,000 guys, but losing 110,000 within 6 months, you are literally doing exactly what you mocked the Russians from doing. The problem is that you don't have the answer despite being the global hegemon Politically, it's suicide. Financially, it's suicide. Geopolitically, you're gonna see the Chinese literally smile at you and say, "Would you like a little bit more war? Because I'm gonna give it to you." If the Americans are that stupid, then so be it. I would be glad.
I, I,
But
I don't think
yeah, go on, go
China
on.
will escalate with Taiwan. They've come out and said that they wish to do it peacefully. My point is, North Korea, they have military on standby, ready to go fucking into South Korea.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm not discussing that. For me, the Chinese intervention in Iran is to sustain the Iranian military with what they need without getting caught. Exactly what they're doing for the Russians. I'm not saying that the Chinese are going to go into Taiwan. I'm saying that the game that the Americans are playing with the Russians in Ukraine can be replicated by the Chinese if the Americans are stupid enough to try something against Iran. And of course, then you have North Korea, South Korea. But North Korea, South Korea, what I said, and I had the discussion like 3, 4 months before, if you think it properly, it's a lot better for China to take out North Korea as a local competitor, technical, strategical, technological, than go after Taiwan. Taiwan is a fucking island. You can literally starve these guys. South Korea is the last appendix of the Chinese extension into the Japan Sea or South China Sea, call it whatever you want. So taking out South Korea locks a huge part of the Japanese coast, of the western Japanese coast, and also renders absolutely untenable a huge part of the western production system. You want electrical vehicles? The South Koreans are roughly 35% of your battery capacity, battery production. You want subcomponents? If you take out Taiwan, 17% it's South Korea. You want consumer grade goods, cell phones, all this shit? You go back to Samsung, you go back to Kia, you go back to Hyundai. A lot of stuff that you need to cripple the West in production-wise, you can do just by taking out South Korea. And the most important part is that to help South Korea, you would need, just in 1950, a amphibious operation. The difference now is that you are not fighting underdeveloped North Korea, underdeveloped China. And this is the biggest fucking threat. You are going to go to war with China for South Korea. And once again, I just don't wish to be right with this because it makes too much sense. But the war that China is preparing is not properly Taiwan. Taiwan is going to get and take over with a military maneuver at worst. But the real war that the Chinese are preparing is taking out South Korea as a Western piece on the chessboard. Because, as I said, that makes the most sense. It has a lot less people for the territory than Taiwan. So the concentration of people, so the kind of battles you're going to fight in Taiwan is not going to be the same as the one you're going to fight in South Korea. You have a North Korean component that can perfectly move you in and out the layout. They understand the language. They also have their own plans about the country. You have a logic of reunification, a bit like what happened with Vietnam, when you had South Vietnam and North Vietnam. So everything makes sense if the Chinese want to push the buttons of the West, especially of the USA. So in that aspect, I do not think, I'm going to repeat, as I said, I do not think it's going to be a walk in the park, but it makes a lot more sense to get rid of South Korea as a danger and as an entry door for the US within the Chinese continuum, Chinese territory, instead of going into an adventure in Taiwan and playing with finally the cards that the Americans have in hand, which is maritime power, naval power, carrier groups, and so on. The biggest advantage in attacking South Korea, as I said, is that you get a land connection, and you can use a littoral fleet instead of using a high sea fleet, a blue navy fleet. And on top of it, as I said, initially you can even have North Koreans die for you instead of having Chinese die for Taiwan. So once again, I'm going to repeat what I said. The biggest trouble that I have with the Asian cluster right now is not Taiwan, is not how the Chinese are going to go to war, is how China is going to treat first its distant abroad, in this case Iran, Central Asia, and so on. And then afterwards, if the conditions are right, for instance, if the Americans are stupid enough to go after Iran, of course, aggravate the situation there, cause a lot of trouble to the Americans, and finally, as I said, make sure for the Americans there will not be a comeback in any of the adventures they're going to start. Not in Iran, not in South Korea, not in Taiwan, and surely not in Russia. The fact that the Americans are already crying about the Chinese involvement in Ukraine, while the Chinese are doing basically nothing when it comes to actual military impact, because they are doing something, they are keeping the Russians financially stable by buying oil and gas. You have to understand how badly they are prepared for this kind of confrontation against China. Please go on. I'm sorry I cut you.
I was just gonna say that we actually get a lot more help from China, but it's industry. So they supply a lot for drone, they supply a lot for robot, a lot for all industry in Russia. Блять, что за...
Yeah. I actually agree with you, and I mean, in the common group, I've already pointed out a couple of things. Even on the artillery, as I said, some of the new 122 shells are like them. They have also probably pushed the Russians to go with a different type of propellant and so on that the Russians have already, but just in order to be able to push the rounds further, there is probably a stabilizer being used there. And as you can see, the Americans themselves say that the Russians have bought a fuck ton of nitrocellulose and gun cotton from China, which the Europeans cannot buy on their own. So, of course, China is helping a lot. I'm not saying, as I said, usually the Chinese could literally end this war tomorrow by refurbishing a whole fucking load of Russian battalions with PZDL 45, and we're speaking about 400 to 600 barrels right off the bat, whereas the Westerners are giving trash to the Ukrainians in two-digit numbers, except for the 777s, where like about 170, 180. This is what I'm saying, is that if the Chinese really want to enter the war the same way as the US is doing for Ukraine, the war, at least the most intense phase, is done within 6 months. I'm not speaking about 2 months, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like the Americans and their minions are talking about when NATO going to enter the war on the side of Ukraine. I'm saying within 6 months, you got definite results, and you got Ukrainians that are forced to recoil at least to the Dnieper. If the Chinese literally invest what the Americans are investing in Ukraine for now 2 years. The problem is that the Chinese are not doing this. They don't want this kind of war right now. What they want is that the Americans are tired. They are tied in Europe instead of going back to Asia. And if they make this stupid mistake of going after Iran in any kind of global initiative, then the Chinese are probably going to be even more directly involved in the next confrontation, because it's just the easiest way to do. And that's my perspective here. I'm not saying like the Chinese are not doing enough or whatever. I'm saying that right now what's going on with the Chinese and the Russians in Ukraine is a very clean, subtle, intelligent cooperation. There are no big, smoking guns about weaponry, about technological transfer and stuff like that. And it's working. well, you can see one side suddenly North Korea can produce 3 to 6 million rounds. I would honestly not be lying that we maybe should check the transfer from the Chinese uh, war stock ammunition to see if this is not a whitewashing of Chinese shell with North Korean colors. So basically, North Korea gets Chinese shells while they give North Korean shells to Russia. There are a lot of things that we can think of, but the most important part right now is that if this war is not going against Russia, it is because Russia could turn around and give cash, technology, any kind of support that is not directly military from China. And of course, we still don't know the status of the satellite and intelligence cooperation with the two states. But overall, what we're seeing in Ukraine is that it's something that I've said since 2022. If China decides to level the playing field for Russia, the results are going to be felt immediately. I'm not saying it's happening the way I thought it would be happening, but there is definitely an impact there, be that only the financial support, financial input. On the other side, as I said, if the Chinese really want to be brash and blunt, they would do what I told you, which is basically delivering the equipment for roughly 100,000 troops to Russia, and then it's game on. And we're not speaking about D-20s or Gvozdicas from 1981. We're speaking PZDAL 45 that have been building since 2002, 2003, average distances of 30 kilometers, and you can kiss goodbye whatever the Ukrainians are trying to throw to the Russians. Once again, I'm going to repeat myself. If the Chinese really want this war to end with a huge number of human losses on both sides, but especially on the Ukrainian side, they just put their balls to the table and say, this is how it's going to go. And you get a de facto hegemonic transition from the US leadership to the Chinese one. The Chinese do not want that because that would lead to the Americans restarting the rearmament program. The war would stop, and the Americans, even if they lose in Ukraine, they would go immediately towards Asia Pacific, which the Chinese just don't want. So in a sense, it helps everybody, except of course the Russians and the Ukrainians, to have this war stay on Europe and to have the Americans commit as much possible as they can in Europe. And in a sense, what's going on right now in the US is that I think a lot of smart people are understanding the clogging of the strategic thinking within the US. And this clogging is that they are still fighting the wars of yesterday. They are still fighting Ukraine, they are still fighting Israel, whereas the critical mass for both sides is going against both Israel and Ukraine. The logic right now would be, but the Americans, most of the American leadership is not going to do that because they put their face to this war, would be to cut off Ukraine, make a deal with Russia, lose the least possible territory if they can, jumpstart any kind of logic within Israel for a type of change, which would also have guarantees, and that would be a kind of permanent presence of American troops in the Middle East, and then turn around and go towards China because China is going to eat them within 15 years. And it's not even that the Chinese are going to overproduce them, are going to over GDP them, whatever you want. It's just critical mass. Even if the Chinese population goes from 1.4 to 1.2 within 20, 30 years, the American population is only growing due to immigration. And that immigration is mostly being done through a massive overspending and a massive fiscal absolute unorthodoxy. If you see how the Chinese are dealing with the excesses of their own open real estate market and other capital markets, the Americans are doing the complete contrary. They are printing monkey money, they are overspending, they are putting themselves more in debt because in their fucking mind, they are having this logic that the subprime crisis that they had can be an engine for growth. The problem is that they forgot that at some point they will need to pay the debts, they would need to pay the grants, they would need to pay the loans, even to themselves. The US right now and the West in general is deluding itself that they can defer payments, they can defer their costs in extenso. They are creating value out of inexisting value. And this is the biggest problem that we're having right now. This is if you want to see why is that so bad, you can see the shell and the military production. A company like Rheinmetall is, okay, now they're having a backlash on the stock exchange, but Rheinmetall is a very small company, not even to the size of Uralvagonzavod, but its value is 100 times more. Yet Rheinmetall cannot even fucking produce 20 tanks a fucking year. Uralvagonzavod is producing 300 to 400 tanks per year. Where is the value? Where is the valuation of both? Where is the so-called quality of production? This is the problem with the West right now. We have a completely warped value system. There is nothing real anymore. And we are building dreams over sandcastles, and then we are selling sandcastles are fucking impregnable fortresses. And then we have the situation we have right now where we would like Ukraine to win, but at the same time we cannot commit anything because we don't have much to commit. And one of the things that I said multiple times, cash is interesting, but too much cash is going to devalue the whole point of you having cash. Look at the initiative from the Czech Republic when it came to the artillery rounds. They sold this fucking idea that suddenly the Czech president, within 3 weeks, had found 800,000 rounds. Then he stated that, in fact, he had maybe found 300,000 right away, and then maybe 200,000 of 122, so 500,000 total. Now, when we analyze the pledges and when we analyze the numbers, we find out that the 1.5 billion that was supposed to buy out 800,000 rounds is going to maybe buy out 500,000 155 millimeters. For the 122, we don't know how much it's going to cost. And then if you want more ammunition, you can have them, but it's going to be ordering them. So basically, the whole logic that initially was that we don't have enough ammunition, but we found stocks, was already a lie. This is the whole point with the West generally right now. It has become a smoke and mirror business, and unless this is changed, unless we admit that we are not who we were back in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, nothing's going to change. We are going to leave the Chinese and the Asians in general take us over. And once again, I'm not like willing absolutely to be this pro-Western guy. I'm just saying that from the Western perspective, if you analyze carefully what's going on, we are just losing grip of the reality. And Ukraine, as it stands right now, is a very small war to what awaits anyone who wants to keep this Western hegemony beyond 2035. And we are already thinking that, I don't know, 400,000 losses on the Russian side and 400,000 losses on the Ukrainian side is already a absolute shit show. But wait until the Chinese are gonna fucking rake any kind of USMC force that would defend Taiwan or would defend South Korea. We have lost the measure of industrial warfare, we have lost the measure of productivity, we have lost the measure of what's the cost of. And all this for boutique weapons that we cannot even produce fast enough. Meanwhile, we're mocking the Russians for their shitty UMPKs. That was it. Sorry, guys. I go on, Colonel.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some stuff. Like you obviously touched on an important point right here. This sort of civilization.
Bro, I cannot hear you. I don't know what's going on.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'll drop down.
Go
Can
on,
you
man.
hear me now? Dude, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, crap. I'll drop down.
I can hear you now, Kremlin. I don't know if you are clicking with your
No,
mouse.
I'm not clicking with it. Can you hear me now? Is it all good? Dude,
Oh, shit.
dude, can you hear me?
Kremlin, I think I can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is it good? Man, somebody, Fennec is clicking or something. It's not me. Ah, Fennec.
Okay.
I'm gonna drop down. Fennec, can you? I'm gonna drop down and come back.
Okay, guys. I think we lost Kremlin, or he's not
Kreml, I
aware
can
that
hear
he's.
you.
Okay.
No idea what
Okay,
Kreml
I
was
don't
gonna
know.
say.
Okay, guys. I think that I'm going to leave it at here. I know that you have more, but don't forget tomorrow we're having a recap space over the Pokrovsky area, because tomorrow we are the 14th, so it's almost half, no, the 15th, so it's half the month of April. And we're going to have a purely tactical map space, and you can add whatever you want. It's going to be more or less at the same time, so roughly around 1 p.m. Thank you very much for being here. I'm really sorry for cutting it short. It's just that I just saw the hour, and it's way past what I wanted to have. Thank you very much. Have a nice time, guys.